It's the first Tuesday of a new month, so welcome back to Top 10 Tuesday. Now, this time I've got my top 10 favorite comic book writers. Now, if you've watched any of my stuff before, you know that I'm more art-oriented. That is to say, I appreciate the comic book art aspect of comic books more than any other. In fact, if a book has what I perceive as bad art, highly subjective thing there, of course, then I sometimes have a hard time getting through it. So if a book has, if the writing is not so great, but the art is spectacular, I can get through it anyway. And I can still even enjoy it. I can put up with a certain measure of bad writing, but not bad art. Having said that, of course, I have my preferences for writing style, and so I have a lot of writers that I love. Like my past top tens, this was a huge undertaking. It took me a while to whittle it down to 10. And the order they're in, I try to put them in least to greatest, but really, the order of this could shift at any moment, and quite often do. So there was a lot of writing and rewriting to get this down to 10, and then to try to put it in a more or less order. So don't get too hung up on my order here, but I tried to do it in the order of their appeal to me. And there was a lot of writers I had to leave off of here. There was probably 40, 50, maybe 60 total before I whittled it down to 10. A lot of honorable mentions would be like Jeff Lemire, love his writing, Fiona Avery. I've only read a handful of her stuff, but it was fantastic. Just love her stuff. On and on. There's just a whole host of them. Peter David was left off. I don't want to give too many away because then there's no tension in the top 10. So here we go. Starting at number 10, it's Bill Mantlo. Now, he's best known for Marvel's Micronauts and Rom, the Space Knight. And those are certainly two of my all-time favorite books. But I also know him for Rocket Raccoon, the miniseries, and he created him within the pages of, I think it was Incredible Hulk, actually. And speaking of that, he had an underrated 5-year run on the Incredible Hulk in the early 80s, and you hardly ever hear anyone talk about his Hulk. Tragically, he was hit by a car while rollerblading in 1992, and due to a brain injury, he could never write again. Real tragic story there. I think his brother has been taking care of him ever since. So we lost a real talent there. I mean, still alive, still with us, but he couldn't write anymore, and that's really too bad. That was a sad, sad day for comic books, for sure. Comictropes did a really nice profile on Bill Mantlo. Apparently there was some accusations of plagiarism, but he touches on some good stuff in here, too. I'll link that video down below if you want to check that out. A lot of good stuff in there. Number 9 for me is J. Michael Straczynski. JMS is perhaps best known as the creator of Babylon 5 for television. But I know him from his fantastic run on Amazing Spider-Man. He started on that book in 2001 and ran all the way up into, I guess, early 2008. He also had a great run on Thor. I really loved his Thor run. Just fantastic stuff. I've read a little bit of other JMS, some of the stuff he did for Image. Really wasn't my thing, but man, what he did on Spider-Man and to a lesser degree Thor was good enough to solidify him on my list. That's for sure. Number 8 for me is Brian K. Vaughan. Probably best known for Why the Last Man, Runaways, and Saga. So many others. He's also done some TV work, including producing, editing, and writing on Lost. And I loved Why the Last Man and Saga. And really all the stuff I've ever read of his, I've just loved. And I just can't wait for him to wrap up Saga to see how that ends up. I think it's just a modern day classic for sure. It's destined to be a classic. He elevates the medium, and that's why he's number 8 on my list. Number 7 is Garth Ennis, best known for his Vertigo series Preacher, as well as all of his runs on Marvel Punisher, and several other books like The Boys, which I have not read yet, and pretty controversial title, but I will probably have to read it one day just as a huge Garth Ennis fan to see if I think it's good or bad. So more on that, I'm sure, in the future, hopefully. My favorite Garth Ennis stuff, though, of course, is Preacher. But beyond that, he had a couple little limited series he did on Ghost Rider. Man, I just thought was fantastic. And I don't hear that talked about too much. But man, it is so good. He sort of brought a lot of the elements of Preacher and his other works, where you have these supernatural entities that are all kind of bad. They're all sort of bad in their own right, whether they're angels or demons, and he kind of brings that sensibility and the wild, zany characters that are present there. He sort of brings that into the realm of Ghost Rider, and it just works so good. If you haven't checked those out, and you can find them, check those out. Good stuff. Number 6 is Brian Michael Bendis. Brian Michael Bendis, an Eisner Award-winning creator. Fans seem to either love him or hate him. He started out doing a lot of independent crime and noir work. I first knew of him from his awesome record-breaking run on Ultimate Spider-Man. He also did what I consider quite possibly the second best Daredevil run ever, probably just after Frank Miller. Alias is one of my all-time favorites also. I mean, Jessica Jones, the stuff he's done with that character that he created is just so good. So good. He did a lot of stuff at Marvel, including Secret Wars. He, was sort of the architect of a lot of those big events during that time. And he wrapped up his contract there and he went to DC. Yeah, I didn't follow him to DC. I understand a lot of people don't like what he's done over there. I guess some do, some don't. But yeah, I didn't follow him there, so I can't speak to that. But man, all of that Ultimate Spider-Man stuff and the Jessica Jones storylines, yeah, I will never forget that. And that's why he's number 6 on my list. Number 5 for me is Chris Claremont, known mostly for his historic 17-year run on Uncanny X-Men, and that's certainly what I know him most from. For all practical purposes, he defined the X-Men as they are known today, and really going back to 1975 when he first started on the series. He's just owned it, and he's been the creator, the architect, Arguably verbose and a little stiff by today's storytelling standards, he will always be my favorite X-Men writer. I mean, I should point out also that he was one of the first proponents, really, in mainstream comics of powerful female heroes. And as far as I know, he's never been canceled. He seems to be a genuinely good person, from all I can tell and all that I have read. But he's right in the middle of my top 10. Chris Claremont. At number 4, I've got Ed Brubaker. Best known for the many terrific crime, noir, pulp books he's done with Sean Phillips. He also did a great Daredevil run that I would probably rank as number 3, right after Frank Miller, Brian Michael Bendis. Then you got Ed Brubaker's run. His Captain America run, I don't know. I might call that probably the very best Captain America run ever. I used to say just behind Kirby's late 70s return to the title. But, really looking at it as a whole, man, I think it might be number 1. It's so good. It's that good. If you consider yourself any sort of comics fan at all, really, especially of the superhero genre, then you have to read Ed Brubaker's Captain America. You have to. Do it. What are you waiting for? Go get it. It's available again. You can easily pick it up. You should do it. So good. He is the true modern-day master of crime comics, in my opinion. I don't think anyone does it better. I mean, the partnership he has with Sean Phillips, they can do no wrong, as far as I'm concerned. If you like crime books, that sort of pulp genre, noir, if you will, Ed Brubaker's the way to go. Go get the Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips stuff and read it. You will devour it, and you will thank me for it if you haven't already got into it. It's so good. At number 3, my top 10 favorite comic book writers ever, as of this moment anyway, number 3 is Doug Moench. He's best known as a creator and longtime writer on Moon Knight. He's also done some well-regarded work on Batman and The Master of Kung Fu. I know him from a whole lot of Marvel titles. Of course, Moon Knight. Moon Knight being, just one of my favorites for my whole life, really. New TV show notwithstanding, I still love the original Moon Knight very much. Werewolf by Night. He did. I don't know if he did all of them, but he certainly did a lot of them, and that was great. Man, that's one of my all-time favorites. He did Marvel's Godzilla, wrote all those he did. Shogun Warriors, did that series. So Doug Moench, number 3 on my list, easily. Number 2 on my list is Steve Gerber. Howard the Duck, Man-Thing, Fool Killer. Steve Gerber has written some of my favorite books ever and created some of the wildest concepts. The nexus of all realities in the swamp in the Florida swamps. His run on Defenders was also really awesome. Just a great run there. I have all of the original Defenders, and the Steve Gerber section is one of the best, for sure. Yeah, he had this strange, quirky, experimental style of writing. Sometimes he would just launch into prose right in the middle of a book. You'd have a 2-page spread of artwork and paragraphs of text where he just went off on his own little thing, and sometimes when I see a writer do stuff like that in comic books, it's annoying because you're like, like my daughter's put for, well, I'm not in for reading prose while I'm reading my comic book. But somehow Steve Gerber got away with it because he was just so good. So bizarre. Just some bizarre concepts that have no equal. If you haven't experienced Steve Gerber's writing, read the original Howard the Duck series, if you can. I'm sure it's available in different formats. There's a good omni of it I have a copy of. And, I identify with that so much. And I especially did when I was younger. The whole alienated teenage angst thing. Well, he cornered that and sort of epitomized it in his Howard the Duck. Quite literally, trapped in a world he never made. And that's the way I have always felt, like I'm trapped in this world I never made. Exception being, this I did make, this room, this library that means so much to me. But, yeah, so Steve Gerber, number 2 on my top 10, easily. At number 1 on my top 10 favorite comic book writers, it's got to be Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas was the first editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics after Stan Lee left that position. I would think he is one of the most prolific writers ever. He's written so much, I think I would just list my favorite Roy Thomas stuff rather than to try to even skim his huge catalog of work. His adaptations of the Robert E. Howard works are legendary, and for good reason. Conan, Kull, Red Sonja, Solomon Kane, and many more. He either directly did those adaptations himself, most of the time that was the case, or he was the editor on them and he was heavily involved with it for many decades. I still consider him the best Conan writer that ever lived, right after Robert E. Howard. I also loved him on DC's All-Star Squadron and Arak, Son of Thunder. You want to talk about some underrated gems? I'd love to have an omnibus of both of those works. His long run on Arak, Son of Thunder and All-Star Squadron. I'd take an omnibus of both of those. I should also mention that he's just a fountain of knowledge and information about comic books history in general, Marvel history and comic book history in general, really. He's written a number of books on the subject. He does pages and pages of behind-the-scenes material for a lot of the big Marvel omnibuses, certainly all the Conans, Savage Sword, and I believe the first couple of Avengers omnibuses, he has a lot of back material there, too, where he talks about his time on the book or just that time in general at Marvel. I should also mention that Roy Thomas currently serves on the disbursement committee of my favorite charity, and one that you should support also, the Hero Initiative. And I will put a link to the Hero Initiative down below, so you should check that one out. He was one of the last people to speak to Stan Lee just before he died. Stan Lee told him, "Take care of our boy, Roy." And it's assumed that at that point, Stan Lee was pretty out of it, and he was actually sort of flashing back and remembering when him and Roy Thomas were still heavily involved with editing and overseeing the whole Marvel line. And so when he said, "Take care of our boy, Roy," he was talking about Spider-Man, Peter Parker. He wanted to make sure that, in his mind, that as he gave up those reins, that somebody would keep it going right. And he entrusted that to Roy Thomas. A couple days later, Stan was gone from this earth. So I found a couple pictures online of that, when that happened, that when he said that to him. Take a look at that. But people aren't ever really gone if their writing and their worlds they created live on in our libraries. So, Anyway, Roy Thomas, #1 on my list. At least as far as right now. And that could change. And this order could change. And feel free to put down below in the comments, what are your top 10 writers? Because I'd like to know. It's fun to debate these things, and let's hear yours. And what order would you put yours in? So put your top 10s down below, and we'll compare. But if you like this material, and I hope you did, come back for more. The first Tuesday of each month, I will do another top 10, and I won't say what that subject will be, because, ahead of time, because that's part of the fun of it. And come on back to check that out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give me a like, and love to have you come back.